All right, today, September 30th, 2021. It's been more than 10 months since that election day of 2020 when President Joe Biden was elected president. Guess what, though? We're still talking about the results of that presidential election. Because now Idaho is in the national spotlight after a conspiracy got traction and all of Idaho counties had their election results altered. That was the conspiracy. That happened in Idaho. Election results in counties across the state had their election results altered from some sort of digital manipulation. Conspiracy powered by a man named Mike Lindell. You may have heard of him. Yeah, you probably recognize his name from TV ads. He's the one that sells pillows. The Idaho Secretary of State's office was then flooded with emails and phone calls about the election manipulation claims, so they decided they were going to take a look at it. It's a major accusation, of course, having every county's election results manipulated. One thing became quickly apparent to the Secretary of State's office, though. The conspiracy claims being made about Idaho are literally impossible if you research how Idaho conducts elections. Here's Joe Paris.
As a part of a massive election fraud conspiracy theory called the Big Lie, claims are being made that all Idaho counties were breached while conducting the 2020 presidential election. This website is the crux of the conspiracy theory. It lays out without evidence how the election results in Idaho and the U.S. were manipulated to favor President Joe Biden and prevent Donald Trump from being reelected as president. Idaho Deputy Secretary of State Chad Houck says looking into election fraud claims is not unusual, but the Big Lie claim was different in the sense of scope and attention.
In this case, given the allegation, given that it is both on a national scope and statewide, implicated every county, we thought it warranted release of the information once it was done.
The Big Lie spreadsheet outlines digital data breaches in all 44 Idaho counties, where they happened and what the vote manipulation looked like. Houck says after seeing the spreadsheet, it was apparent the claims made based on it were off.
One county had been manipulated 4 days after we actually got the results, and the results they gave us 4 days prior were consistent with what they canvassed.
Houck says the data to the left here about the source of digital manipulations were clearly off for several reasons. So they wanted to focus on the election numbers themselves. An initial idea was to try and reverse engineer the numbers to figure out how they were calculated.
It took about 45 minutes to come down to a formula that was consistently applied across all 44 counties. You take the Biden total and the Trump total, you multiply them by 0.0420625. And then whatever number you get there, drop the decimal points. And that's the number of votes that you shift from right to left. And that's how they came up with the formula or the numbers on the spreadsheet.
An interesting note, Houck says he did his calculation on counties in other states to see if they checked out. The ones he tested all matched up, implying that the formula was used to adjust vote totals in all 50 states as well as the national total. The Secretary of State's office takes all fraud claims very seriously, so they audited 2020 election results in Camas and Butte counties. Video recording is there of the entire thing. Both counties came back with nearly identical results. Houck says that the audit shows a human error margin of less than 1%, drastically less than the claims of widespread fraud.
Human error is not fraud. It's just a component of the system when you use humans within the system.
Speaking of humans, that thought raised a red flag for Houck when looking at the Big Lie spreadsheet. There are a handful of Idaho counties that couldn't be hacked digitally at all. They use paper tallies.
At least 7 Idaho counties don't have an electronic or a digital component within their counting and tabulation process.
But what about Idaho's most populated area, Ada County? The Big Lie claims a 21,000 vote difference between their results and the actual results. Is it possible the system was breached?
I do have absolute confidence in our elections. I specifically have confidence in how we've run the elections over this past year, including the 2020 election.
Ada County Clerk Phil McGrain says the county actually audited a large amount of votes in December of 2020 during a recount election. The results there were consistent and showed no evidence of manipulation. McGrain says based on how Ada County does elections, digital manipulation is effectively impossible.
Our vote system, the actual tabulation system that counts your votes, that processes your ballots, and even creates the ballots, that system is kept completely offline. We work very hard to keep that room separated. It's a special secure room inside our facility to ensure the integrity of that process. For someone to tamper with our systems, they must physically be in that space.
All right, Joe, I got a couple questions. Let's start with this one. This number, 0.04202 or 0625. Where'd that come from?
You would have to ask Mike Lindell and the people at the election symposium, as it was in national news in recent weeks, Brian. There was a group of Trump supporters that are very adamant that the election was manipulated, and they continue to try and prove this. The evidence, though, that they supposedly have, it's not compelling. And when experts and independent analysts look at it, they say it doesn't make sense.
So why then does a state like Idaho give this any oxygen?
Yeah, and I asked that the Deputy Secretary of State Chad Houck. I said, could you just ignore this? And they could just ignore it, but it is such a bold claim to say that every single Idaho county was accessed and manipulated digitally that it is important for them to look into. And they look into a lot of voter fraud claims, Brian, and we don't know about a lot of them because they don't come up to be a big deal.
They don't publicize them.
Correct. This one they wanted to publicize. So this action of auditing an election and looking into claims, that's not unusual. What's unusual is the size and scope of the entire thing.
Okay. Interesting.
And really, the whole thing's important to the Secretary of State's office, and they want to work on voter education because they get a lot of the same questions.
Sure.
So they've actually started a YouTube series that I was watching today, and they have all kinds of in-depth answers to questions that I've seen from our viewers about how does tabulation work, how does the system work, how does everything work, and I think that it's something we're going to talk about closer to election season. But if you're interested, you can check out the Secretary of State's website on YouTube.
So that way you can eliminate any chance of there being any secrecy when it comes to elections in Idaho.
Yeah, they want everyone to see everything. So there you go.
We have seen everything. Thanks, Joe.